Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the official party and the presentation of the colors and the playing of the national anthem. Color guard, present the colors. Color guard, retire the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the 23rd President of Norwich University, President Richard W. Snyder.
That was a great day.
One day now.
Well, good evening, everyone. Friends of Norwich, special guests, faculty, staff, students, members of the public, Symposium attendees, State of Vermont officials, and especially our sister senior military colleges and ROTC units all over the world who are watching right now digitally through the great work of our staff and the staffs at those schools. We are simultaneously broadcasting this to every ROTC unit, every service in the United States tonight. And and then for the panel tomorrow, and then Lieutenant General McMaster's talk on Friday evening. Tonight, the Todd Lecture Series made possible by the generosity of Ellen and John Drew, and named in honor of my predecessor, retired Major General and President Emeritus W. Russell Todd, Norwich University, class of 1950, and his late wife, Carol, in gratitude for their dedicated service to Norwich University and the entire Northfield community. General Todd, please rise, sir, and be recognized by the sounding round of applause to welcome you back. Todd Lecture Series, founded in 2008, will always be free and open to the public, as well as the entire Norwich student body, and is streamed live for the Todd Lecture Series website to students and alumni across the globe. We also have many of our graduate students who are online watching us as well this evening. Many of the past speaker presentations are also archived on that website if you'd like to catch up with some of our great speakers. I would like to thank all of you for coming tonight, especially our honored guest, General Mark Milley, the 39th Chief of Staff of our Army. But before we do that, I've asked General Milley and the Chairman of the Board, General Gordon R. Sullivan, class of 59, to unveil a plaque. And it's a plaque in honor of the 100th birthday of ROTC. Generals, would you do us the honor, please? And I will read the plaque. Sir, you could, we are ready. Here at your duties. Unveil. So this plaque will be placed in the main foyer of Jackman Hall, right near our Medal of Honor gallery space. That's a special place for all Norwich people. It reads, the Reserve Officers Training Corps celebrating 100 years, 1916 to 2016. Modern ROTC traces its origins, directly to Norwich University's founder, Captain Alden Partridge, who believed that well-trained citizen soldiers provided the very best defense for this republic. The primary objective of Partridge's American system of education was to prepare youth for positions of leadership in times of peace and in times of war. Thus, from its inception in 1819, Norwich University has embodied the citizen-soldier ethos so central to the mission of the Reserve Officer Training Corps. The first private institution in higher education to incorporate military instruction into the curriculum. Norwich provided a model for the Morrell Land Grant Act of 1862 and laid the foundation for the creation of America's Reserve Officer Training Corps in 1916. The commemorative plaque is dedicated in recognition of Captain Alden Partridge as the father of ROTC, and as Norwich University as its birthplace, in honor of the 100 years of existence of the Reserve Officer Training Corps, 21 April 2016. And you are here to witness. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Big round of applause for our Chairman of the Board, Norwich University's General Gordon R. Sullivan, class of 59.
Hey folks, I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker, General Mark Milley, 39th Chief of Staff of the United States Army, commissioned through ROTC, Princeton University, where he was a hockey player. For those of you who know where you are. You are in the Kreuzberg Arena. Above our heads, which you can't see, there are a number of flags, which I want to point out to all of you. There are 3 Division III NC2A men's championship flags, and we are very proud to note one from our women, a major, major accomplishment to have 4. So how about a nice hand for all the Norwich athletes and the hockey team. Now, since we're on the subject of hockey, in addition to being the 39th Chief of Staff for the United States Army, General Milley is the recipient himself of a major award from the American Association of Hockey Coaches. Each year they present an award, and my eyes are getting bad, so I'm going to read this. It's the Leo Landriello Award. It's awarded to an American hockey player who best epitomizes the best of hockey and goes on to have a distinguished career in whatever line of work he chooses. Ladies and gentlemen, this past year at the Frozen Four in Tampa, Florida, General Milley was the 11th recipient of that award. So, without any further ado, how about a nice round of applause for the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, General Mark Milley.
Well, thank you, General Sullivan. I appreciate that deeply, and I didn't expect all the hockey accolades. I did receive the Lou Lamoriello Award this year. That was in lieu of getting drafted into the NHL. I was supposed to get drafted. In fact, one of my teammates, John Bombard, happens to be a graduate of Norwich, where we kind of co-captained the great Fort Bragg Dragons back in the day when we were both in the 82nd and SF. And Boomer, as we knew him, he didn't get drafted either. So, Boomer, you can get your shirt, and we'll play here in the rink a little bit later. But, hey, this is great. And I never thought that I would ever come to a university where there was a museum named the Gordon R. Sullivan Museum. I thought they only named museums after dead guys. So I just want to get visual here. VFR Direct, yes, the man is still alive. But I tell you what, General Sullivan is an inspiration to me, and I was commissioned, as he said, in 1980 out of Princeton ROTC. And General Sullivan, shortly thereafter, was our chief, and Chief of Staff of the Army. And he was an inspiration to all of us. We were young lieutenants and captains at the time. And it was a time of really excitement, commitment, but also a time of high risk, high danger. It was the last kind of death throes, last decade of the Cold War. We didn't know it at the time, but things were going downhill for the Soviets, and then we were in the throes of a training revolution and bringing on new equipment. And it was General Sullivan who coined a term called "No More Task Force Smiths." And from his early tutelage of me as a young officer, he didn't know me at the time, but I've taken that "No More Task Force Smiths" because I find myself now as the Chief of Staff of the Army in a not dissimilar situation where readiness matters, and readiness is our #1 priority. So thank you, General Sullivan, for teaching me and an entire generation of young officers and teaching all of us what we learned today and how we apply it. Thank you. And I also want to take a moment to thank Rich Snyder. He's the only person on earth I know that is both an admiral and a general at the same time. I haven't figured that out. And he also informed me, and this was news because I'm originally from the Boston area, and I kind of thought I knew Vermont. Used to play UVM and hockey and come up here a lot, actually play hockey, and I thought I knew Vermont, but I had no idea until Admiral General Snyder informed me that Vermont declares its independence and secession from the Union like every year. So how's that going up here? It's going pretty well. And I didn't realize, as an admiral, I didn't realize Vermont had its own Navy. I mean, I know you got Lake Champlain, but I didn't realize you had a Navy. So, do you have a Navy? I'm getting some boos out here. Are those all the guys who are getting commissioned in the Navy? My mother was in the Navy, so my dad was a Marine, my mother was in the Navy, I'm in the Army. So how many Navy guys we got out here? How many Army? Anybody going for an alternative to military service and joining the Air Force? Wow, it's a lively crowd. Any Marines? Coast Guard. Damn. All right, son. Hang in there. You'll make it. You'll make it. Navy will take you anyway. And if they don't, Air Force will. So. Wow, it's a rowdy crowd up here in the Great Green Mountain State. Hey, I also want to thank Peg Combs, General Combs, for being here. She's the head of our ROTC, as you know. She's made a lot of great change. So, Peg, thank you for being here. Eric Brigham is the Army PMS up here. Eric and I go back a long way, and he and I have served together in many bad places. And Eric, thanks. I'm not sure where you are in the crowd. Where are you at? There you are, right down here. Hard guy, tough guy, great PMS, a great officer, and thanks so much for what you're doing to train all the young cadets up here. I know that we had the band, the Norwich band. I'm not sure where you are. Can you string up a couple of tunes there just to acknowledge where you're at? There you are. Thanks so much for doing that. I know you make every ceremony up here very, very special. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And where's my regimental commander there, Alex Bardell? Where you at there, Ranger? Okay. Why are you sitting up there by yourself? You have no friends or what? What's up? And I noticed that Alex is from North Carolina, so he had to come north of the Mason-Dixon line just to get educated. So well done, son. And then I know that we're in a rink, a hockey rink, and this is very special to me. And I played hockey from the time I was a little guy all the way up through university. Still played after graduation. As I mentioned, played with Boomer and some of the guys down there at Fort Bragg. Last time I played hockey was up in Canada with the Fort Drum Mountaineers. Played a Canadian Army team. But this is pretty cool. And this rink is a very special rink because very, very few schools can ever claim a national championship, let alone 3 of them for the men and 1 for the women. So that's a real outstanding achievement for this school. So well done to Norwich for your hockey teams, both men and women. Well done. And thanks to all of you for being here, alumni, for supporting this great school, and obviously for the cadets, but also for the rest of the student body and for the community of Northfield and everybody here in Vermont. It's a great state. It's a great part of the country, and this is a great school. And it's a very special moment for me as an ROTC graduate and the 39th Chief of Staff of the Army to be standing before you on the 100th anniversary of the commissioning of ROTC, of the beginnings of ROTC under a Princeton guy named Woodrow Wilson. And I'm very proud of the fact that Princeton University is the only Ivy League school that's had ROTC for all 100 of those years. And the rest of them happened to kick them off, but Princeton stayed true to its colors and kept that ROTC. ROTC is very special to our country. It's an important institution, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But thanks to all of you, whether you're going in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, doesn't matter. You're one of a very, very small, select group of American citizens who have chosen to put the uniform on and defend our great nation against the enemies of our country. But I want to talk a little bit about where you're at here at Norwich. This is a pretty amazing school when you think of it. And I know that you all know the history of your school. But think back to those early days in the early 1800s. We have just, as a nation, had not only earned our liberty in the American Revolution, but we had just finished the War of 1812 against Britain. And for about the previous, 200 years or so or more, we had been fighting up and down the Hudson River Valley, Lake Champlain, etc., in a worldwide struggle between France and Britain that manifested itself here in North America, and specifically right here, upstate New York on one side and Vermont on the other, and all the New England states. We had a great power war that raged, and that war was complex. It was difficult. It involved various indigenous Native American tribes. It involved militias. It involved terrorists. It involved standing armies between the French and the British, and it was very deadly. And it went on for a couple of centuries, and you're right here in the middle of that. At the end of that war, War of 1812, which, contrary to popular belief in Canada, we, the United States, actually prevailed in that war. And that was a very turbulent time, not only here in the United States, but also overseas. This is the time the Barbary Pirates were at war with Algiers, fighting early versions of terrorism. But also over in Europe, war raged in a big way with the Napoleonic Wars, where not only did you have Britain and France fighting, but you had all of the other countries, where it finally ended, of course, at Waterloo. Then you also had smaller wars in Europe, Naples against Germany, and the 39 various states of Germany trying to unify for the first time and not getting unified till later. And then south of the border, south of the U.S. Border at the time, way down in South America, you had countries like Colombia and Venezuela and Ecuador, all declaring their liberation and independence from Spanish control. That world, when Norwich came into being, was a very turbulent world. It was a world of violence. It was a world of instability. It was a world in which radical and significant political, economic, and geostrategic change was taking place. And we, the United States, began to understand the importance of developing a foundation of military training, a foundation of the officer corps, to provide some discipline, some cohesion, some competence, and some military professionalism to what was then largely state militias. And we chose to educate a variety of leaders, so we started West Point. And then Alden Page, captain at West Point, superintendent in fact, decided that West Point wasn't good enough, and he wanted to make it better, and he came here and created Norwich. And from that moment on, in 1819 till today, this school is not only the oldest private military college in the United States, but it is in many ways, like West Point, the heart and soul of the officer corps, of the Army, the total Army, the Guard, the Reserve, and the regular Army, but also, as we saw from the cadets, so many other services. Norwich plays a central role in the defense of our nation, and it has for coming up on 200 years when we hit 2019. It's really a remarkable school. You've got a lot to be proud of. You should all, both alumni and students alike, faculty alike, be extraordinarily proud of this school. If you ask yourself, what's some of the legacies? During the Civil War, this school began to provide a whole series of trained officers primarily in the northeastern regiments of New England and New York. The entire class of 1862 enlisted in the Union Army as soon as they graduated, and I was told that a few of them, probably one of your predecessors from North Carolina, went down south and actually fought for the Confederacy. We'll figure out who they are on the rolls of the alumni. But Norwich graduates in the Civil War were very significant. They commanded corps and divisions and brigades and regiments and served in over 130 different significant battles and organizations throughout the war. A guy named Brigadier General Edmund, I found out in my research, left Norwich before graduation in order to participate in the Civil War. And he fought with the 19th Regiment of the Holy Land, the 19th Regiment of the great state of Massachusetts. And he fought in the infantry, really the most significant branch of any service. And not only that, how many of you are infantry, by the way? You got a commissioned infantry? And everybody else couldn't get in the infantry, I guess. So, okay, good. And so Rice, he later won the Medal of Honor in the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. And then you got Colonel Seaver. He also, like Rice, he decided to leave Norwich before graduating. He decided to command the independent nation of Vermont's infantry, the 3rd Vermont Infantry. And for his actions under intense enemy fire, he also earned the Medal of Honor at Spotsylvania. Many, many heroes throughout Norwich's history. And there's many heroes to be made right in this room tonight. And there's been many, many heroes over the years in all of our wars, in all of our services, in all of our organizations that have come out of the Reserve Officer Training Corps, and we're very, very proud of that. Since signing that act in 1916, Woodrow Wilson, he brought into being what an organization that produces 60% of the United States Army's officers. 60% of our officers today in the total Army, the regular Army, the Guard, and the Reserve, are produced out of ROTC. And today, 100 years after Woodrow Wilson brought it into being, ROTC has 273 programs at colleges and universities throughout all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and all of our territories. And there's over 35,000 ROTC cadets that are out there today, just like you. It's an amazing organization. Peg, you've got a lot to be proud of, and I'm proud of every single one of you. Now, if you ask yourself, some of you, how many of you are seniors and going to be graduating here shortly? Okay, so if you ask yourself, what are you walking into? Well, look back at when the school was founded. You're walking into a situation, you're going to put the uniform on, you're going to commission, and you're walking into a global situation that in some ways is as equally turbulent, equally violent, in fact, far more complex than that which this school was born into 200 years ago. And you're going to find yourself engaged in a very deep, long, difficult struggle against radical terrorists coming out of the Middle East with its latest manifestation of ISIS. You're going to find yourself, unfortunately, in a very difficult struggle against a revanchist Russia, an assertive China, a provocative and aggressive North Korea, or a terrorist-supporting country called Iran, or any other multiple contingencies that may arise. Each and every one of you, when you graduate from here and you are commissioned, regardless of service, you're going to be fundamental to our nation's defense, just as all the graduates have before you, just as George Casey was when he graduated ROTC from Georgetown, and Pete Shoemaker graduated ROTC from University of Wyoming, or General Wyand, our last commander in Vietnam, who graduated ROTC out of Berkeley, or of course, what arguably is our greatest general, George Marshall, who graduated ROTC out of VMI, and of course your greatest general from Norwich, Gordon Sullivan, ROTC out of Norwich. So you're going to follow in a long line, and you're entering into a very, very turbulent era. And there's no doubt in my mind that the training you've received here, the cohesion, the competence, and the character building that you have earned and learned here at Norwich is going to stand you well in the face of arguably some difficult times ahead. And we're going to need your leadership, every ounce of it. For that, I am sure. And our sons and our daughters of this nation deserve good leadership. If you look at readiness, you look at combat power, the most important element of that is not technology. It's not the guns, the planes, and the ships. It's not the weapons. It's not the computers. It's the people. And most importantly, it's the leaders. And that's what Norwich does. Leadership is far and away the most important element of what we think of as the elements it takes to win in the crucible of ground combat. And our nation deserves that. It deserves you. So what are you going to have? Well, first of all, you're going to have to be competent. There's no room for second place in combat. There's no coins or trophies given out for ties. You either win or you lose, and the cost of losing is death. The premium of the business you're about to join is not the profit margin of the bottom line. It is the lives of your soldiers. And what will make the difference on the battlefields that you undoubtedly are going to face is going to be your personal competence. No one is going to follow a platoon leader who's constantly lost. No one is going to follow a platoon leader who can't call for and direct indirect fire. No one is going to follow a platoon leader who can't call in a medevac or call in close air support or get an attack helicopter on the ground. No one's going to do that. You're going to do that. And if you do it well, your men and your women are going to follow you. If you don't do it well, they won't follow you. It's as simple as that. You're going to have to be very, very competent. But it takes more than that. You're also going to have to be compassionate. You're going to have to love your soldiers as you love your very family. And you're going to have to be willing to give your life for them. You're going to have to be willing to actually die for your soldiers, for your families. And you're going to have to be compassionate to their every need and take care of them as if they were literally your brother and your sister, your mother, your father, or your son or your daughter. And then you're going to have to be leaders who have tremendous character. And that starts with integrity and honesty and candor. And I guarantee you, your character will be tested like it has never been tested before. And you will have to have steel spines to withstand the pressures that you're going to have to endure in the years ahead. And Norwich, I believe, has prepared you to do that. But character and compassion and competence are skills that you're absolutely going to have to deal with. Part of that also is going to have to be your intellectual development. You're going to have to be open-minded and adaptive to be able to deal with the complexity of the world that involves so many different dynamic elements that it's hard to describe in sentences. If the world of 1916 was complex, or the world of 1945 was complex, the world of 2016 is intensely complex. And I can tell you that from personal experience, and I know there's many others who can tell you that as well. And you will graduate and be in that world, and you're going to be leading the soldiers and the sailors, the airmen and the Marines in that world. You'll be dealing with terrorists. You'll be dealing with hybrid armies. You'll be dealing with little green men. You're going to be dealing with tribes. You'll be dealing with national leaders and local leaders. You'll be dealing with politics and economics. And you'll be dealing with direct fire and indirect fire. And you're going to be dealing with it all. And it's all going to be dealt with simultaneously. And for that, you're going to have to be ready. And that's why readiness, in my mind, is number one. And their development as a leader and the things we've learned over the years from our past leaders still apply to everything you will do. You're going to have a strategic vision, the ability to look beyond the next hill. You're going to have to think and act and lead to develop others in a way that maybe has never been done before. You're going to have to be innovative and open to criticism and apply lessons from battles gone past. If you look back at one of your Norwich graduates, a guy named Ted Brooks, maybe you've never heard of him, but he graduated back here when ROTC was first formed during World War I. And then in 1941, Jacob Devers, General Jacob Devers, who was a commander of a corps at the time, he called on Lieutenant Colonel Brooks to be named to the staff of the new armored force at Fort Knox. And then he promoted him from Lieutenant Colonel to Brigadier, skipped a rank, never wore the Colonel Eagles. In 1942, he promoted him yet again to Major General. And you say, why? What did Devers, what's up with that? How do you skip ranks like that? How do you get promoted from Lieutenant Colonel to Major General in like 12 months? How's that happen? It's because the guy was good. He was competent, he was innovative, and he was adaptive. And in his case, Brooks's case, what he did was he developed self-propelled artillery. And he developed the assault gun. And then he developed not only the weapon, but the doctrine to go with it. And then he trained a force at the small unit level to do it. And then he rose up to eventually command the 11th Armored Division. You too, every one of you, are going to have to think and act and be innovative like one of your predecessors, now long past, General Brooks. He was ultimately awarded the Silver Star for repeated heroism in combat, so he certainly had huge courage. It is said that his men loved him, so it's clear that he had compassion. But what set him apart was his innovation and his drive and his leadership and his decision-making. Another guy that, a graduate, or not a graduate, actually, he went to this school, General Harmon, I'm sure you know him, and General Sullivan met him. He attended Norwich, also during World War I, left, and then actually got his commission out of West Point. He was a tough guy, a hard guy, and also a lot of talent in the 1924 Olympics, great athlete. And he commanded the 1st Armored Division in North Africa and Italy in the 1942-43 time frame of World War II. And he is known and first came to great attention in the war for his personal actions at Kasserine Pass. And General Sullivan always talked about Task Force Smith from the Korean War, which didn't go well for the 21st Infantry. And we lost a lot of good soldiers because we were unprepared and unready. Our nation has a long history of that. And another great example of it is Kasserine Pass. And you know that any student of World War II U.S. Army history knows that we suffered a horrible defeat at Kasserine Pass. And there were an awful lot of young men who gave their lives in that battle because we were not competent. We were poorly led. We weren't well trained. And we weren't hard. And the Nazis, the Wehrmacht, dealt us a very serious blow. But General Harmon was different at that battle. He stood out because of his courage, because of his competence. And he stepped up as a deputy commanding general, replaced a relieved general. He reorganized the Corps, the 2nd Corps, and applied a whole bunch of lessons learned in a very rapid manner and instituted a training program that brought that Corps back to life that was so painfully learned at Kasserine. And then he awaited and then transferred responsibility of 2 Corps to its newly arriving Commander General George Patton. Harmon was a hero, and he came out of the hills of Vermont, and he was trained right here. And I would ask you to look back in your history of this school and the heroes that have gone before you and study them. Because no less is going to be asked of you. You can take that to the bank. You are going to be involved in ground combat, and you're going to have to be prepared. So learn from the Rices, learn from the Brookses, learn from the Harmons, and get yourselves ready. And remember what we fight for as a leader. Throughout our history, our strength, the strength of our nation, has come from our values, our ethos, the diversity of our people. And our army has fought tyranny and liberated the oppressed around the world, in Europe and the Philippines and Northeast Asia, North Africa, throughout the Middle East, Central and South America, all throughout the world. American soldiers have been the vanguard of American values, which is the respect for life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness and equality, no matter who you are. And as we gather here today, know that 180,000 American soldiers are in 140 countries around the world, protecting our freedom, standing for the same values in faraway places like Afghanistan and Iraq, and very many other places as well. And each of them is a living symbol of the greatness that is America and the goodness that is the American people. And as they serve forward, American units are here in the United States training and preparing for some unknown next contingency, the next crisis, or the next battle. And for all of those soldiers, every single one of those soldiers or sailors, airmen, or Marines that you're going to lead, their service is never about themselves. It always extends to others. It extends to those that they help, those they advise, those they defend. And it extends to their brothers and sisters who are wearing the uniform on their flank. And it's a special bond that all of us develop, a bond that's unlike any other. It's a bond that's been carrying on for more than 240 years since the United States Army was formed from a company of Pennsylvania riflemen on 14 June 1775. It's a bond that's been codified in blood. And at its heart, the history of the United States is really the story of ordinary men and ordinary women from all walks of life who are willing to do extraordinary things for their country and for the values and ideals which we hold dear. The story of the United States Army, the story of the United States, is a story of personal courage, selfless sacrifice, and incredible service. And it's been made by over 30 million men and women. My mother and my father both served. Most of your mothers and fathers served, and many, many others. 30 million who served in uniform since our nation was founded. 2.5 million of them have served just in the last 15 years. My parents' generation fought in World War II, my mother in the Navy and my father in the Marines. And they are known, I think, as the greatest generation, is what we call them. But I'm here to tell you the generation that fought in the last 15 years, your generation, the millennial generation, you are America's second greatest generation. You're an amazing group of people. You too are hard and tough and compassionate and competent. And you are about to join them. 2,514 of that 2.5 million that have served in combat in the last 15 years came right out of this school and are graduates of Norwich University. And several of them have paid an incredible price in personal sacrifice in not only life and limb, but also sacrifice of their families and separation. And you're going to join that long line. But there's something more than that, than just service to the nation. It has to do with the oath that some of you are going to take as soon as you're commissioned. And we take, all of us in uniform, enlisted and officer alike, take an oath of allegiance. And that oath is a simple oath. And it says that I solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Simple enough. There's over 190 countries in the world that are in the United Nations. But we, the United States military, are the only military of all of them that swear an oath to a document. And embedded within that document is an idea. And it's unlike any other idea. It's an idea that says that all men and all women, no matter who you are, no matter what your religion or lack of religion, no matter the color of your skin, no matter how you identify in your gender, no matter whether you're gay or straight, whether you're Catholic or Protestant or Jew or Muslim, it doesn't matter who you are. But in this country, in these United States, every single one of us is equal. That is a powerful idea. And for that, you're going to take an oath. And you're going to swear an oath to that idea that you are willing to die to protect that idea. That idea is so powerful, and it came into being only 240 years ago, that has brought down tyrannies and built countries. The dictators of the past have been brought down by an army that is dedicated to an idea. And that is the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines that you are going to join. And that is very, very powerful. And you will be willing, without any purpose of evasion, to suffer grievous wounds, to lose your arm or leg, to separate from your family, or to lose your life in defense of that idea. It's a serious thing that you're doing. It's a serious thing you're about to do. And Norwich and ROTC for over 100 years and Norwich for coming up on 200, have prepared those that have gone before you to execute that oath. And I feel absolutely confident that Norwich and ROTC has prepared every one of you to execute that oath. I thank ROTC, Peg. I thank Norwich, Admiral General, and I thank all of you for being here tonight. And I congratulate ROTC on its 100th birthday. Army strong.
Thank you, everyone. General Milley has agreed to take about 10 minutes worth of questions. We'll get 2 mics. I see one right there. Where's the other one? Right there. This mic is for cadets. This mic is for our guests. Who would like to have the first question? All right, state your name. State your name and your question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Derek Lotito. I'm a junior Navy ROTC. And my question is there a particular event or experience that you've had in life that has greatly impacted you? And if so, how has that shaped who you are as a leader today?
Thanks for the question. I don't know if there's a single event marriage, I suppose, is pretty significant. Birth of your children, that's significant. I would, in my case anyway, everyone might have a road to Damascus moment, but I've had lots of road to Damascus moments. So for me, it's the cumulative effect of a lot of things. I'm shaped personally, mostly by other people, and I would argue that all of us are. My mother and father and brother and sister, growing up, that sort of thing. High school teachers and coaches on various teams, same thing in college. And then in the Army, I know it's said by a lot of people, but in my case it's particularly true. My first non-commissioned officer, Master Sergeant, now retired, Beck, he shaped me in a lot of ways as a young officer. Meeting guys like Boomer shaped me in a lot of ways that we're never going to talk about. So there's a lot of things, I suppose, in my life that have shaped me throughout the years. But I couldn't cite a singular example, and it changes as you go along. In my current role, for example, General Sullivan's been mentoring me now for actually quite a while, and others. I worked for Secretary of Defense Gates for a little while. That certainly informed my outlook on things at the national strategic level. Command of the 10th Mountain Division, 3rd Corps, very significant shaping. Obviously time in combat in various places. So all of that combined, sort of like a cake mix, all of that combined, I would say is what shaped me rather than a singular moment in time or event.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a guess?
Good evening, sir. My name is Michael Heimel. I'm a Senior Studies of War and Peace Major, Army ROTC. First off, thank you for coming to speak with us today. You mentioned that learning from figures of the past and from the history is an important thing that Americans need to do, but I think we're better at saying that than actually applying it. For example, in Vietnam, we relied on a host nation force to repel an invading and expanding insurgency force. When that didn't work, we took up a strategic bombing campaign, and all this was accompanied by military advisors. It seems to be that we're handling the situation in the Middle East with ISIS in the same manner, and we're getting just about as underwhelming of results. Can you tell...
Thank you very much. And what service are you going into? I just want to...
The Army, sir.
And say again, Army?
Yes, sir.
Yes. The Aleutian Islands will be great. You'll love it. It's going to be awesome, son. Hey, look it. Actually, I wouldn't disagree with you, to tell you the truth. I was asked earlier by somebody, what's the situation with ISIS, okay? And I'm not going to go into any kind of classification, but I'll give you my cut, my personal cut. I've got a lot of time in combat. I got a lot of time in Afghanistan and Iraq. I know this thing is being broadcast. I know that there are some journalists, etc., in the room. So I happen to be, I think anyway, relatively candid in my views. I'll give you my cut for what it's worth. My personal opinion is someone who you can consider informed, somewhat experienced, and I have some view of the situation. I took over in August as the Chief of Staff of the Army. I traveled to the region in September, and as a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I made my assessment at that time. Talked to all the American commanders and many of the indigenous commanders, etc. Then I went back in December. Okay, so my assessment as today, and I read all the intel and I keep up to date on everything and talk to the commanders by phone and VTC very frequently. Without going into anything classified, my candid assessment is that very, very significant progress has been made against the entity, the organization called ISIS. Progress, however, is not winning. And I said this in testimony, I think, last week or the week before. So no one should be high-fiving in the end zone yet. But the President of the United States has told us to destroy ISIS, or Daesh, as it's called. I am confident that the strategy we are currently executing is applying a significant amount of pressure and a lot of punishment to that organization. It remains to be seen whether or not that is going to be enough to destroy it with the common understanding of the word destroy, meaning that organization no longer is combat effective and the caliphate, the self-declared caliphate as they call it in Iraq and Syria, is no longer in existence. That remains to be seen. But I can tell you that the enemy, ISIS, no longer has the strategic momentum, which they did have, and they have suffered tremendous amounts of casualties. Their leadership has been significantly attrited. They've lost a lot of territory. Their finances have been damaged significantly. Their lines of communication are being interdicted. And they're under a very, very, very significant amount of pressure from the air, from the ground, and in other forms through other domains, space, cyber, etc. So that's sort of the situation as it stands now. They are not destroyed yet. Our task is to destroy them. I believe we will do that. I think we've made significant progress to that end. It's not over yet. No one should be doing high fives yet. But I do think we're on the right path.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Major Steve Gagne. I'm a Norwich alumnus, and I am an ROTC instructor here at the university. As you can see, our Corps of Cadets wears a common uniform, although they're members of one of the multitude of ROTC programs here. Could you elaborate a little bit for the future leaders of our services to the importance of joint interagency and multinational teamwork and cooperation?
Yeah, sure. I will. Come on.
Sir,
I like other services. I'm not just an Army guy. I'm a joint guy. I'm a Joint Chief Staff guy, right? So, here's my take on it, right? Now, I don't think the Army wins wars, by the way. And I don't think the Navy does, or the Air Force does, or the Marines do. It depends on what you're doing. So, if you want to punish an opponent, if you want to attrit an opponent, if you want to rescue people and things like that, you can do small niche things or specific tasks with only one branch of service or maybe two of them. But if you're involved in something called war, W-A-R, war, war is an act of politics. It's not a military act. It's an act of politics where you're imposing your political will on an opponent through the use of violence. And armies don't go to war. Nations go to war. States go to war. So in order to win a war, you have to apply all the power in a synergistic way in time and space that the nation state can bring to bear. So it takes all the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. It takes everything in every domain, space and cyber and maritime and air and the ground domain. And it also takes the CIA and the State Department, and it takes the FBI, and it takes the Department of Commerce. And oh, by the way, you can't stop there. It's not only for the United States, the nation, that goes to war. The United States fights with allies and partners. We do not fight alone. This fight against ISIS has got some 50 coalition members. When I commanded the force in Afghanistan, we had 42 allies and partners underneath us. In every war, we fight with allies and friends. We don't go alone. So the interagency, the idea of jointness, and the idea of fighting with allies and partners in combined operations, that is fundamental to what we do. It's absolutely a necessary prerequisite to winning in a war. You can do certain other things by yourselves, but not fight and prevail in war. So it's absolutely critical that we do that. And it's also critical that we're not parochial. And I know I said in jest earlier about Army, Navy, Marines, and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, we're all brothers and sisters in arms, regardless of the color of the uniform. And in fact, there's good logic to put us all in the same damn uniform. And it would be a hell of a lot cheaper as long as we went with the Army uniform. And so we don't want to be parochial, but it is critical and it's fundamental that we operate as a team. You don't win by yourself in this business. But thanks for the question.
Good evening, sir. I'm Cadet Jordan Character. I'm a freshman here in Army ROTC, and I'm majoring in international studies. My question is, in terms of United States military global presence, what would you consider too much, and what do you think is just right?
Too much of what? Global presence or too much of the military?
Too much in terms of global presence, just global presence of our military.
That's a tough question, actually. And it's a question that's currently under a lot of debate for those folks that are interested, is the issue of the United States of America. You know, I said we have 180,000 soldiers in 140 countries, and kind of you sit there and you go, whoa, wait a second, what about that? Is that too much forward presence? Does it cause allies and partners or other countries to become nervous or scared that we are aggressing somehow, or we're dominant somehow? Cultural imperialism has, been the United States has been accused of that. We have been accused by enemies and opponents of being imperialistic and so on and so forth. So it's a legitimate question. But I would tell you this. We, the United States, are far more wanted around the world than not wanted. And I've been in an awful lot of places. If you look today, for example, in Asia, I would argue that many anyway, probably most, of the countries in Asia really want the United States of America to remain as a stabilizing force militarily, diplomatically, and economically in the Western Pacific. There's a couple of countries I can think of that don't, but most do. And they want that through presence, forward presence. And there is something to be said about being there. There is an argument about over the shoulder, over the horizon. That's a debate. That's a legitimate debate. How much should be forward? How much should be over the horizon, etc. But the fact of the matter is, our allies and partners do want us in Northeast Asia and the Western Pacific. If you go to the Middle East, there's many people who would say, well, there were too many American soldiers and therefore we got rejected. Yeah, sort of, maybe, but not really. So if you go to most of the countries of the Middle East, they are okay with American help. Financial help, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance help, counterterrorism help, advisors, etc. And the last thing they want us to do is leave the region. And you can do that through a lot of countries. You can just Google these countries and see what their position is relative to the United States. Africa, very welcome in most parts of Africa. Same thing in Latin America. American military is very welcome. We have a lot of friends and partners. And in Europe, we are a full-fledged member of NATO. So the United States, I would argue anyway, and from my perception, the United States has an awful lot of friends and partners around the world. A lot of allies. Way more allies than enemies sort of thing. But if you look at some of those opponents or potential adversaries or great power adversaries like a Russia or China, some of that, and you look at how many friends or allies they have, and it's not very many. So it's a tough question, the exact balance of military forces and forward presence. That's one that's always under debate. It's currently under debate in the Department of Defense and the U.S. national security environment. And where the sweet spot is dependent upon the situation at the moment in time. But I can tell you that the amount of presence we have forward over the last, call it 70 years since the end of World War II, has earned way more friends than enemies. And it's a worthwhile investment, and I think we'll have to continue to do that into the distant future in order to maintain some sense of stability in the world. But thanks for the question. Tough question.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
This is for you, though. This one's for you.
I think they're standing there. I think you can go right to it.
Sir, in appreciation for everything you do, we want to thank you with Tar Bucket, a piece of our history. and it has a plaque on there reading, "In appreciation for your inspiring words at the ROTC Centennial Symposium, Norwich University, April 21st, 2016.
I got one thing to say. Oh, yeah. No. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to sit, please. And I'm going to ask a favor, and I'm going to send Alex down, our favorite regimental commander, down to the door, Alex, and you have to hold the whole regiment before they can't go through that door. We have got to get General Milley safely off in his aircraft, and I want to thank Major General Craig for providing all the airlift support of our incredible Vermont Air National Guard. So he can leave also because he's coming by air. So he's going to start to head out, and we're going to ask a big round of applause for General Milley and General Sullivan as they exit. Guests, you can go that way. Corps, just hold. Exit. This way. This way.
Hey, for the cadets, take the rest of the week off, would you please?
I guess I have to then.
Huh?
I guess I have to.
Right.
We got a big day tomorrow.
What day is today?
Maybe on Monday.
Today's Friday?
Yes, no, tomorrow's Friday. We got a big day.
What day is today? Friday? Thursday. So, what are they doing tomorrow? Nothing, right? What about Monday? All right, we just changed the plan. Frag order. I got 4 stars, he's got 2, he's got none. So you guys get Monday and Tuesday off. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please keep your seats.